Meet Figure, the biggest antagonist in Roblox Doors, the Door 50 guardian of the library, and also the last entity that you have to go through to reach the elevator. But what's the story that led to this major character? Well, lucky for you, this is the true origin of Figure in Roblox Doors. Comment down below what you think about the entity and let the story begin. Surprisingly enough, the idea for Figure actually came a couple years before the idea of Roblox Doors ever came to be. His creation could be dated all the way back to November of 2018, especially as Redibles, the co-developer of the game, states that the Figure was originally created as a secret enemy in a very old scrapped L-Splash project that was inspired by games such as Apocalypse Rising and Unturned. Figure would have a 0.001% chance to spawn in place of a zombie. When the Figure spotted a player from up to 200 studs away, it would make a loud roar sound that could be heard from incredibly far away and begin dashing to the player on all fours, then instantly killing the player when it reached them. At this point in time, the character was simply going to be put in place of a special spawning monster, but the fact that the developers stated that it would dash at players on all fours does give it an idea that Figure was originally going to be portrayed as a dog or some similar type of animal, rather than running at a player with 2 feet. But think again. This is the first ever screenshot of the model of Figure all the way back in 2018 when it was designed for that Apoc-inspired game, and right away we can notice many similarities compared to the current version. The tall, sleek profile that both characters have, the long skinny arms, the large round head, and also the curved arms with no fingers are all cues dating back to the original design. But you know what's even better than a picture of old Figure? How about a video clip showcasing his movement all the way back then? Yeah, crazy stuff. Even the roar sound clip was completely different to his current groan, and he originally was not a one-hit death monster as well. Fast forward a year later in July of 2019, Redibles states that the Figure was used one more time in another scrapped project that I can't talk about, which gave it almost a reserved spot in our minds, and we had an attachment to the creation. It seems that the developers have kept the concept character in mind for quite a while, and sooner or later they wanted to create a game that would revolve around it. Well, in the spring of 2020, in the month of April, things started to click for the team and for the concept as well. Redibles states, "I began to work on a solo project that was meant to be a story-driven horror game, highly inspired by the other horror games that just started popping up all over Roblox around this time. Such as Nico Rocks' rooms, for example, going through all of those doors and having 2 monsters to deal with in the game. I decided that I wanted to use the Figure as the main antagonist of this game, and opened Blender to remodel the original design in higher quality. I ended up eventually dropping this project in favor of Doors. Blender, for those who don't know, is a very powerful 3D modeler program, and in order to create the complex versions of Figure, they had to use it in order to improve the original design. This is the remodeled version of Figure during that April 2020 project, and as you can tell, it's really starting to take shape and look like Figure itself. With the additions of the ribcage bones around the chest and long arms, they are similar, except for that face though. I can't imagine Figure with 2 eyes like that, man. This was also around the time where the screenshot of Figure was posted on the Doors wiki, this time all colored up, which gives a better idea of what the entity would become. A couple months later, in October 2020, Redibles says, while visiting the scrapped game concept mentioned in the July 2019 part, a monster was created that resembled the sandworm from the Dune movie that had recently released. It featured a circular body with a giant mouthhole on the front with a circular row of teeth, and massive spiderish legs stretching out from the body that would grab onto walls and ground to pull itself along. So you're telling me that the current face of Figure was actually inspired from the sandworm within the Dune movie? Very interesting take, but it all makes a lot of sense now. Especially if you put the sandworm head on top of the 2020 project, you can see the resemblance quite clearly. With that in mind, in March of 2021, Redibles does go on to say that development of Doors finally began to pick up, and we were creating a new entity. I showed Splash an unused monster model I had, which was a figure model that I used for my April 2020 project, taking the body of this model, removing the head, and replacing the head with a small version of the sandworm inspired monster from the October 2020 project, creating an entirely new design for the figure that we instantly thought was great. And as we've seen previously, this was the creation from that project, essentially a stubbier version of Figure that was also a bit shorter, but with the same mouth structure, just without the extra details attached to the entity, such as the vein on top of the head. Fun fact, this model was also used during the Doors extended trailer right before the release of the game, which is pretty cool. This was the model used up until just 4 days before the game's release, where I decided to completely remodel the figure from the ground up with its full design in mind. And this, of course, has led to what Figure, as we all know, looks like today. Now that's all pretty cool, but a couple things do come to mind, such as Figure's ability to be able to turn on and off a light source within its body, especially at will. Sources do say that this was an added feature and it turns on whenever it growls, which it does, in order to help with echolocation based within their environments. But an even more interesting thing to note is that there is a sound file labeled Awesome inside of the model files of the character. And it is correlated to this sound effect, which basically plays the "oh my god" meme. Oh my god! Yeah, very funny. As for the sounds of the entity, you're in luck because I was granted permission to showcase the original sounds. The first one being the entity's growl sound, which you may hear a lot as it stomps around the library using its echolocation at work. The name of the original sound file was called the Skyla Growl, made by Supernob earlier this year, and this is what it originally sounded like. Yep, basically 30% faster than the Figure growl that we know. And as for that iconic Figure death scream if you get caught by him, well, it's the same thing, but just at a 25% faster play rate on the original sound easily enough. But what do you think of Figure and its history? Would you want his old version back in Doors? Let us know down below and take care.